Peter, hey, congratulations on your new film,
Thank,
Exposure.
thank you so much, Gig, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Hey, not a problem, not a problem. This is a one intense psychological thriller, but we have to hear it is what initially drew you that you wanted to direct this film?
So, yeah, the film on the surface is a psychological thriller, but it's more a story kind of peeling back the layers of something the media doesn't understand as much as I think they should, and that's obsessive compulsive disorder. So, I happen to be someone that has dealt with OCD pretty much their entire adult life, and I and others that experience OCD see the media kind of show versions of OCD that aren't technically wrong, but they're treated rather lightly. And they're treated, the big dreaded word everyone throws around is treated as a quirk. And it is unfortunately a lot more intense than that. A lot of us experience it in ways that could only be described as kind of a waking nightmare. And that seemed to line up with the genre of psychological thriller, especially like a suspense anxiety thriller, because hey, that's that's kind of a taste of what you experience when you watch a psychological thriller, suspense and anxiety. So those genres seem to line up, and I kind of saw it as low-hanging fruit. I can't believe no one had made a film like this before, so I hopped on that.
So when you were approached for this project, they approached knowing that you had OCD, or is just basically it was more of a coincidence than you liked it because you could relate more to the character?
I was actually I wrote and
Oh,
I was never approached for this. This is sort of um my team's project. So we sourced the financing ourselves. We sourced the scripts. The We didn't go through a studio. We independently hired a casting director to reach out to this is definitely true indie, so to say.
most excellent. Now I've seen lately a bunch of OCD films because OCD in the past in the past for more than a decade was portrayed as a comedic sense, but as of late, people are taking a serious look of OCD in films, and I come to understand that OCD there are different variations of OCD, some light and some more deep. So could you tell us about this character Tanner? What kind of OCD that we are discussing here?
Of course. So, the name of the themes of OCD can be sometimes colloquial. And one big thing about Tanner is the comorbidity between two different things, the comorbidity of a traumatic incident and OCD. Because a lot of times people just develop OCD because they have genetic predispositions to it. They go through puberty and their brain chemistry completely changes. And sometimes it is from a traumatic instance. And then that's how this case kind of comes about. So I wanted to really show that. I would call on the surface level Tanner having the contamination obsession that people might be a bit more familiar with. There are those that might argue because it's spurred from something real that actually happened in his life that it could be called a real event obsession. But that's more of a colloquial term. Yeah, so if we were the contamination obsession is also shared by another character in the film. Her name's Izzy, and her contamination is more circles around illnesses rather than being poisoned. Those are two kind of separate fears under the same umbrella of contamination obsession. Now, OCD goes to some wild places. Like other themes can concern harm OCD. Am I going to harm the people that I love? Sexual orientation OCD. Am I the sexual orientation that I hope that I am? Like, do I relationship OCD? Do I actually love my intimate partner? It goes to like some strange ones. It goes to some very alarming ones that I don't think I'm even going to talk about on this Zoom. But anyone that does a deep dive on OCD will see that some of the more taboo topics are there and people share them. That's why it's so important that this film kind of starts broadening the definition of what OCD is to the average person that hasn't come into contact with it, so that they can kind of better understand it. And then I will say that I am not a therapist, so more clinical information can be found very easily online.
And that's the case why you wanted to portray different types of OCDs with the group in this film.
Yes, absolutely. Because it is such, they all share something in common, and that thing that OCD sufferers all share is the inability to tolerate the unknown, the inability to tolerate the non-zero chance that their worst fear, their worst, darkest fear may actually happen. Take someone that has another common version. Take the hit and run OCD. I like if this person might be terrified of getting into a car because they believe they might run somebody over. That's actually a more common than you might think. That might have happened from a traumatic instance of something like that actually happening. Or it might have just kind of happened. However, these things happen. However, we as people need to go to work. We need to go see our family members, our friends, and it's really hard to exist in, say, America, a very large country, without being able to drive. So there are if a person's going to live a happy and fulfilling life, which is entirely possible with OCD, OCD is absolutely treatable. They are going to have to tolerate the unknown of, yes, if I get into this car and drive, I might get into a car accident. I might hurt somebody with my car. It's not particularly likely, but there's a non-zero chance of it happening. And someone with OCD is incredibly intolerant of that tiny amount of unknown. And that's what exposure response prevention therapy is. That's what exposure therapy is. It's being able to put yourself right up against the things that make you anxious and realizing, wait, I can tolerate the unknown of this thing happening.
Wow. This exposure therapy is basically putting people into that situation so that they could actually overcome whatever fears or situations that concerns them.
Because that's right. Now, granted, the full name is called exposure response prevention therapy, and the response prevention therapy is you cannot engage in a compulsion after those anxieties are activated. Because for someone with that classic contamination obsession, that would involve not washing their hands after they touch the doorknob, or in the movie, how Izzy stands in the trash can for 30 seconds or whatnot, like not putting hand sanitizer on her hands just to make her feel better, because you have to tolerate that unknown, you have to tolerate that discomfort, because the reality is the human body is pretty good at processing anxiety. Anxiety isn't actually that harmful for you. It's unpleasant, but like it's not actually that harmful for you. So if you don't feed the cycle of OCD and don't feed it with compulsions, your body will tolerate it and the anxiety will go down. And then suddenly that stimulus won't be as intense anymore. And all of a sudden, so much of your life is opened back up to you, as you can see with Tanner's journey in the movie.
Now, also want to point out that the other character, Nicole, she's going through a certain process herself through this entire film, as for her concerns. Yeah.
One thing that untreated OCD really targets, not targets, but a nasty side effect of untreated mental illness, or really any chronic condition, is that it affects the other people in your life. Uh, Marriage is a team. It's a team sport. People have things that they want to do in their lives, and if one person is taking up all the emotional and medical and real estate, if one person's taking up that much space and the other person kind of finds himself in a caretaker type position, it becomes imbalanced and it doesn't become healthy. And we see Nicole really start to lose access to the things that she was fighting for, because she's, showing up for her husband Tanner. And this is something that I think is really important for people with mental illnesses to know. And this is kind of a sentiment that's flying around on the internet right now, is that mental illness is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Because there are the people in your life deserve to not Do they deserve to be able to go for the things that they want to go for as well? And relationships are a two-way street. It's really hard for someone with a debilitating mental illness to hear that what they're going through is affecting other people that way. There's a lot of guilt and shame associated with that. But it makes the necessity of good accredited treatment that much more necessary.
So tell us about your casting process to find Douglas and Margot to play perfectly for Tanner and Nicole, and how do you get your actors into the mental state of their characters in a film like this?
Every actor is different. And in terms of acquiring Douglas and Margot, I had an amazing casting director. Her name's Lisa Essery. Oh my goodness, she was absolutely wonderful. And she landed two perfect folks for our two leads for us, and they had great chemistry. And indie films don't really get a lot of rehearsal time, especially when people live all over the country. So, with the time that we had, we were able to kind of we were able like we got a lot from what little time that we had. And when we were shooting, we were always up against time. We were shooting on some of the tighter days. We were shooting something like 7 to 8 pages, which is a breakneck speed to shoot something like this. So, when it comes to kind of getting them into character. Uh, every actor is different. Douglas preferred to sort of keep it with the text, keep it on, not do the Stanislavski thing where you're pulling from like your childhood, but more do the Meisner thing where it's like, okay, here's the scene. I'm going to approach this scene as it's kind of written, and let's see like how we can inform this scene with the text. He kept it very present, which I respect immensely. Margot is did a lot more kind of character building before she came to set. So different actors do different things, but they both came at in a way that I think was very successful.
Well said, well said. So what's up next for you after this, Peter?
International sales of this movie. I mean, like it's never ending. I've written a horror movie over the last year. I'm like 5 drafts into that, and then I'm writing another suspense movie right now. I would love to shoot the suspense movie just by myself with my buddies because I feel like the biggest thing getting in the way of exposure was nailing down like financing and cast and then also distribution. There are these long periods where nothing seemed to happen. And in my mind, if I can just make the scale even smaller and shoot something with a small crew of people that that are around that already know me, and I can write something that is a lot more feasible to shoot, less locations, shorter script, then we'll be able to do more and create more in a vastly shorter amount of time because a lot of time went by between the genesis of this project and us delivering it for distribution.
And I mean, you could stop me if I'm intruding so much. May I ask what type of OCD you have?
Sure. So it's changed quite a bit. I'm not going to get so much into the details, but there is one sort of area of OCD where the compulsions themselves are actually mental rather than physical, and that's called purely obsessional OCD. It's called, or the nickname for that is called pure O. There's actually, you mentioned there are other movies about OC that have come out this year. There's one movie called Pure O, which I actually met the director, Dylan Tucker. It premiered at South by Southwest, and it's about a man with mental compulsions. They circle around his personal life, and yeah, no, it's interesting. I talk a lot about this with a lot of other therapists, not just my own, but also therapists in the OCD community. I think a striking majority of the folks that deal with OCD actually have mental compulsions rather than physical ones. So, not to get too much into the content of it, but it deals a lot with compulsions that rather than like washing my hands or counting numbers, the little reassurances and avoidances happen mentally rather than physically.
Well, then let me wrap it up with one last question. As a director, especially like on a project like Exposure, was it a challenge to complete a project like this with your OCD and how you overcome it.
Yes, in the sense that there were a lot of unknowns to tolerate, and that is the thing folks with OCD struggle with the most. Um, there were some things that actually made it a little bit easier. I've seen some, like a lot of therapists. I've had this my entire life. I've been on so many medications. I know a thing or two about it. And when it came to the script and after I had the script rigorously looked over by therapists before we went into shooting and then also checked after, it came from a place of comfort that other people felt empowered and comfortable acting in the scenes or working on this film, despite it getting kind of weird, because they saw how certain that the folks with OCD on the film, myself most prominently, were with the subject matter. So my familiarity, my deep, intimate familiarity with the subject matter actually helped quite a bit. And it also helped a lot of other folks on the online OCD community connect with the film as well. So that part actually kind of helped when it comes to actually doing the job. Yeah, OCD gets in the way. It never doesn't.
Well, I'm glad you got this completed. It's an accomplishment by itself. Or I've seen many films and I'm starting to understand OCD, even though, you know, some of us have a certain perception of it, but as more things, more films are progressing through these years, hopefully the mindset of society will change towards. So,
I think
Peter,
it already is. I think it already is, especially because you're saying things like this to me right now, and I appreciate that.
no, thank you, Peter, for carrying this conversation with us about OCD and your film exposure. So hopefully we get to do this again.
Yes, please. Thanks so much.